Hello and welcome to Literati, where we delve into the world of literature, African literature and stories. I am Judith Atibi. Now, you might have heard of Makoko. It's a floating slum just off mainland Lagos in Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos State. Makoko serves as the setting for the book we will be discussing, Water Baby. Water Baby is a coming-of-age story that follows our protagonist, 19-year-old Baby, who yearns for an existence where she can escape the future her father has planned for her. With opportunities scarce, Baby jumps at the chance to join a newly launched drone mapping project aimed at broadening the visibility of a community. Then a video of her at work goes viral, and Baby finds herself with options she could never have imagined, including the possibility of leaving her birthplace to represent Makoko on the world stage. But will her life beyond the lagoon be everything she dreamed of, or has her everything she once been in front of her all along? And to answer these questions and more, the author Chioma Okereke joins me on the program. Chioma, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Chioma Okereke is a Nigeria-born poet, author, and short story writer. Her work has appeared in various publications, including the Kalalu Literary Journal and the Varago is 40 anthology. Her debut novel, Bitter Leaf, was shortlisted for the Commonwealth Writers' Prize for Best First Book. And her short story as well received first runner-up of the inaugural Costa Short Story Award. She divides her time between the bustle of London, the hustle of Lagos, and the rustle of rural France. Chioma, once again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Judith.
And congratulations on your new novel.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it is very good looking. Everywhere I'm taking this book to, every single person tells me, "Oh, it's such a good-looking book. Can I borrow it?" I said, "No, I'm one of the lucky few that have it." Well, congratulations again.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming on. When I first saw Water Baby, what came to mind, and when I started reading it, it jumped out of me was, of course, Makoko, right? So, Water Baby is set in Makoko, at least in the opening scenes.
Yeah.
And it's a contributing factor as to how the plot of the book pans out, right? And so it makes me wonder, why did you decide to write a story around, Makoko, where Makoko is at the heart and center of the story, and what influenced your decision?
So I wrote Water Baby during the pandemic, but actually during the pandemic we were watching a lot of food programs, and so the algorithm would just bring us anything and everything. And it was one day we just flipped on anything when we were having dinner, and there was an episode of the best ever food review show that was shot in Makoko, and it blew my mind. Like I say, I was aware of the community, in as much as we are all aware of the community, those of us who haven't ventured there. You're crossing the third mainland bridge, you see something from the corner of your eye, but you're in your mobile phone, like in that sort of way. But I was watching this food program, and this American chef navigating the waterways in search of foodstuffs to show his, a broad audience. And I was ashamed of my own ignorance, and I thought, how have I never been to this place? How did I not know more about this place? And it is such a compelling setting anyway for anybody with a creative imagination. And I was just gripped for this 20-minute show, but as I was literally trying to drink in everything that was going on in the background, my mind wandered, and Baby just popped into my brain, and that's really how my characters come. I don't sort of choose when my protagonists appear, but I just saw this young woman piloting a canoe. I got an image of, I knew her family, I knew all this kind of thing. So I just knew that she was my next protagonist.
Right.
And I'd said to my partner, I said, I bet you if I wrote about this, publishers would want this book. And he said, why don't you? So I just went on a deep dive doing the research for Makoko. And like I say, it is so rich. Rich with content, rich visually. It's the perfect setting for a novel.
Honestly, which now takes me to the writing process for this book, right? Because you just said that for you. You had to talk to your partner, and he says, "Why not?" And then you, in researching,
Yeah.
you saw such, so much that has to be said and exploring it. But then, talk to me about your writing process. What was it like for Water Baby, and where did you draw for inspiration? Did you visit Makoko? Did you go to meet the people? What was it like for
I
you?
didn't actually visit till after I had written my first draft, but for me, the way that I craft a novel, I don't really have a plot. I usually have characters first. The characters come and they spend a long time in my brain, and then eventually I sort of hear their voices and off we go. And so I had written Water Baby in my sort of a new phase of my writing, which I call my fail fast writing. So it was quite quick for me to draft the novel. When I wrote A Bitter Leaf, I was a debut author. I was transitioning from poetry to prose, and so I think I was a lot more deliberate and painstaking with my language, whereas now I'm also older and wiser. I was like, let me do this thing quickly. If it fails, I can move on to something else. And I'd written some other previous books like that. So I was very much in that phase, but when I would go to my computer, I would look at this blank screen and I would just think, now what? And I was like, this seems to trouble. Like, why am I not writing? So then I'd go and do more research about Makoko, because I was like, maybe I don't know enough. And it's also, I'm writing from outside my experience. Maybe that's why I'm a bit intimidated. And I would go back to the screen and I would have a blank page and I still couldn't start writing, now what? And I would go back and do more research. And this is how I came across this drone mapping project, which was Code for Africa, I think were the ones that did the initial drone mapping project in Makoko. And so when I stumbled upon that project that was giving young girls tech skills and and empowering them by having them have an understanding of what's going on in their inside the waterways and giving them greater visibility in the eyes of the world,
Right.
It suddenly struck me. And when I went back to the page, I realized that now what question, it wasn't my question, it was Baby. And so I had the beginning, I had, the impetus I needed to start writing this book. And it really is about Baby saying, now what? Because she doesn't want what traditionally other people want or what her father wants for her.
Or what's expected as by society,
exactly.
and how you're conditioned in terms of
Exactly.
what your path would be when you live in a society or community.
There you go. And then you're sitting on one side of Makoko and you're looking out, you're looking towards Lagos and looking at all those opportunities and beyond that, and she's questioning.
I mean, when researching Makoko, what was the wildest thing that struck you about Makoko?
I think it's not even the wildest. The hardest thing that struck me was how difficult it is actually to see inside a home. So when you think actually, what was so lucky now with like the explosion of social media is that there's actually a lot of footage. There's a lot of sort of drone, mapping content and stuff you can see, but you don't actually see a lot inside the home. So that was where I think I had my greatest struggle to really understand what the construct of a home was, the layout, how life happens there, because it's so contrary to what we think of as brick and mortar, light switch, all those kind of things. So it's actually really, really hard trying to convey those differences without being able to see. And I actually found some really deep dive articles where some journalists had gone to stay in a hut for a week as an experiment, whatever it is. They would tell you some things, but actually it's very difficult to get that visual. So I think that was probably the hardest thing. And then subsequently, I got some footage from a friend of mine who was a producer on Blood Sisters. And they had filmed one of the episodes, I think took place in Makoko, and so they had gone into people's homes because they had to build a hut and build a replica. And so that was really great to have that kind of insight, just to make sure that you're portraying things accurately, because again, obviously it's fiction, so there is, you have some leeway, but I wanted to make it feel as authentic as possible.
I can imagine when it comes to research and everything else in writing this, but well done so far.
Thank you. I think, to be honest, it was just intuitive. I think if a man had presented itself or a young boy had presented itself in my mind, that is the way it would have. That's what I would have done. But I think she was so powerfully presented in my head. There was no other question. And I think there invariably in life there are lots of women's voices that don't get heard, and particularly young women. And when we're thinking about a community which also has a lack of access to basic social amenities, whether it's healthcare and lack of education, there's inevitability that there are a lot of young girls who will not have those opportunities, and so her voice would be even more diminished. So I thought it was even more important to write from a young woman's point of view.
I can imagine. Let's talk about her life now and just go deep dive, because really, besides the plot being Makoko and also being driven around there, there's also a baby story, which is a coming of age story, right? Her struggles, her ambition, you explore it very beautifully in this book, right? And I'd like for us to discuss her journey. The loss of her mother forces her to very quickly become parentified. You see her be a guardian slash, parent slash a mother to her younger siblings.
Exactly.
You also see her be more like a caregiver to her father as well. We also see her be the voice of reason amongst her friends, and she's taking up this role and responsibility at 19. And you can tell that she's been doing this longer before she had clocked 19. And when she had the opportunity to chart a new course for her life, she makes a decision that I still don't understand why. I don't get why she thought it was, why?
Well, exactly. You can't say anything else because otherwise it's a spoiler if you say why.
Yeah, and I'm trying not to give away the book. I'm trying not to give away the book. But why was that the right choice, and why did you decide to write it that way?
It's not my choice. It's not my choice. It's ultimately baby's choice. But I think sometimes when you have, you have so many options coming to you, and you can weigh those options. I think we're all in shock, myself included, that may be her ultimate decision. But I think she still realized with all the opportunities that came her way, she's still able to chart her own course. She still makes her own path. She makes her own decisions. Actually, no door is closed at the end, if you think about it. But what I like is that she's still not manipulated by anybody. She's still choosing to make those decisions, what makes the most sense for her. And I think that we would assume that given all the range of options she's ultimately presented with at the end, that of course we would take, we would go through door Y. But I think for some people that's too much. And actually I've seen enough, I've experienced something, I've come out of my comfort zone, and I actually realize what brings me the most joy, or I realize, okay, I don't need that at this point in my life, and whatever it is. So I think I've been asked that question by other people, that's why it amuses me, but it really wasn't my choice.
There is a Japa Wave that has, been sweeping the nation, Nigeria, and we've seen it unfold in different forms. We've also seen how it's affected or eroded the economic sector, whether it's education, finance, medicine. We've seen it. They've seen a brain drain in all of these sectors, right, across the nation. And I dare say that the Japa Wave has been long before it started in contemporary times. We've seen it in the 90s and even the 80s as well, with the US visa lottery, with the British move for more skilled workers to come in. We've seen those happen, over the decades, and in the millennia. But at the risk of giving away the plot of this book, it's not just the opposite two sides of the coin as well, where everyone is wanting, there's this crab mentality of wanting to get out, but there's also ones who want to come back in.
I think that's the complexity of life, though, because this is why I think it's so interesting, because Udunu and Baby themselves, they're very close. They're probably the closest of the foursome, given how much they confide in each other. And probably, deep down in their hearts, they don't know what each other is thinking. They don't actually genuinely know what each other is feeling. And I think because equally, as much as Baby is an old 19, she's also still a very young child. So there's some parts of her that are, fully formed and have been parentified, as you say, but there are other parts that she hasn't had much exposure to anything else. So there's a little part of her that's quite naive and, and just, a fledgling. And so I think that is the interesting part, is that we don't know those parts themselves because perhaps they don't know themselves, and it was only until this opportunity that presented itself that you really see what you're made of and actually what your ultimate goal is, which is why it's quite surprising what happens in that third act.
Yeah. Listen, I said, what in the world is going on? But also, Baby is battling with grief as well. Why did you put grief in there? You know, him battling with, the loss of a brother. I'm sorry. I'm doing my best not to give away the book. It's not working, is it?
That is the worst giveaway.
Huh.
I think it's so intertwined in people's stories. That's the thing. I think that is I think from the outside you can see a young person presented and you just think, oh, that's it. They're just young and they've got their whole life ahead of them, and what worries do they have? That kind of thing. But actually, I think it makes a much more complex character where you have someone dealing with these big issues, but equally is just very young in her life and has so much more to deal with. And I don't even know, to be honest. It just, like I say, characters present themselves, and this is, that's what she has to deal with.
Yeah.
I guess what I didn't anticipate would be such a big part of her storyline.
Yeah,
until I
because
started
grief
writing
is
it.
such a strange thing, and
Yeah.
the way how she's navigating her grief
Yeah.
is, because you can also tell that she's also grieving her mother as
Yeah.
well. If a mother was there, how she'll be able,
Exactly.
you can see that she was
Yeah.
also finding mother figures and all the
Exact-
other.
yeah.
It was very interesting
Yeah.
to see, grief being. I was almost about to say my story now, and I said I cannot say my story as well.
Yeah.
But I could see myself as a young baby as well, who had lost a parent and was finding that parent in
Other
different
people,
in
yes,
other people
exactly,
in her life.
And also trying to equally understand what it means to be a woman and how to make decisions about what kind of woman you want to be as well, without that mother figure,
Right.
in a place that is, largely traditional as well, but you're at this pivotal point where you do see other modes, other ways of being as well. So I thought that was, quite an interesting part of Baby's story, when you think of the people that she is looking, that she sort of seeks out for that kind of maternal surrogate. And then equally, then her whole world explodes, and the eyes of the world come upon her as well, and it presents other complexities, challenges, and the other people she meets by virtue of her viral moment. I think it's it's just a very nuanced situation, and I think that she navigates it successfully, and I think we do see her come of age, we do see her mature, we do see her understand herself. She challenges where necessary, and the first draft was actually probably very quick, about 3 months. I wrote the first draft, and then at my earliest opportunity I went to the community. I hadn't been to Makoko, so I arranged a trip, and saw some stuff on the land, and then did a trip on the water. I went to visit a school as well, and I had arranged like a selection of school books for the kids and stuff, but I just but you go there, and all these kids came rushing out, and I was just like, oh my God, what can I do for these kids? And so I went back, and as I was submitting my second draft, I thought I have to write an author's note to kind of explain why I wrote this book, why I set it here, and also if anybody like me, your curiosity would be piqued, try and guide them to some place, because that was the thing, is that I find that a lot of people hadn't heard of Makoko at all, and then the moment they see a picture, or the moment you give them a little bit of information, they just go on a deep dive themselves, because there is just so much rich history there. And so I felt compelled to sort of guide my readers towards one, doing more research themselves, and I was also thinking about how we can actually ultimately help the inhabitants of the lagoon. And so I set up an NGO. So I basically set up an NGO, having shone a light on this community in the book, in the hopes of actually, doing some good and working with some local partners, and actually, ultimately empowering children and the inhabitants of Makoko to, best empower themselves. So that was literally part of that whole calling. And so publishing takes quite a bit of time in the UK, so I had a long publication time. And so then it was just polishing and trying to make it as authentic as possible. Like I say, I mean, I was born in Nigeria, but I haven't lived here for a very long time. I'm writing outside of my experience. I'm writing from a perspective of a 19-year-old growing up in a slum, and just making sure, smoothing those edges and making sure it reads as believable as possible. Because there is that line between, while it's fiction, it's a very educative work. There are lots of issues in the book. We've touched on some of them, but we're talking about, gentrification, digitization. There's so many things, so many female issues, all sorts of things. So just making, the book as refined as possible before there comes that point where you can't change anything.
Makoko has been plagued, I wouldn't say plagued, but more like there's been a lot of attention.
Yes.
Right? We've seen people come in and then they want to go. It's like, it's the mecca of good deeds. You know what I mean? Like it's the mecca of, people just come into the country, they want to do some good deeds or some charity work. Where do they go to? Makoko. And in spite of it being the mecca for juxtapositioning yourself or acting like you're doing good deeds, but really you're not doing anything. What would be your call to your readers? What do you hope that they take away from this book?
I actually hope, in fact, what I hope they take from this book is that it's very easy to make change. I think this is the thing. I think it's the smallest of things that alters baby's trajectory. And I don't want that to continue on because, like I say, when I went to visit the community, I thought, what can I do? Yes, I've given some books. Yes, I've talked about the community, but how does that ultimately help? And I thought, well, if I can do small and somebody else can do small and we can all do small, then we can ultimately all together make some real change there. And so that is what I wanted people to see, that actually these things are achievable. And again, I don't want to give away too many things that happen in the book, but actually...
My lips are sealed because the things I want to say, I cannot say them.
You've already given away too much.
I have given way too much.
Given way too much.
I cannot say it.
Yeah. So I think that's, I think perhaps that's it. No dream is impossible and nothing is too small. Those are probably my overarching things.
Okay. I mean, when we're talking in the green room before we came on, I was talking about how I was very, very ashamed of my ignorance as well.
Me too.
And just literally ashamed. One of the things that you brought to fore that I didn't even realize it was a diversity that was even in the community.
Well, it was quite interesting to me because I went with Pelua was my tour guide there, and he was saying, Chioma, be prepared, you're not going to understand anything. And I think he was not just saying that because I'm Oyibo for in terms of purposes, but he was saying, you're not going to understand. Like, no, they don't speak English. No, they don't speak French. You know what I mean? Like the pidgin is too much for you to unravel and all these kind of things. But there is such a diversity of ethnicities, tribes. It's a kind of perfect blending. And yeah, I think it's one of those things we take for granted. We tend to think very, structured and siloed here in Nigeria. Is this one Yoruba? Is this one Igbo or whatever it is? But you also don't think of how many people have actually made the lagoon their home, because Makoko started out actually in the 19th century where fishermen from the Benin Republic and nearby Togo and stuff all settled on the lagoon. And obviously people from, far and wide have now come and spread and grown on there. And it is a completely blended environment.
Nice, nice. Well, I mean, I should ask more, but I'm going to let you go. But before I let you go, I would like for you to play a game. All right, it's called Humor Judith.
Okay. Okay.
It's called Humor Judith.
Okay.
So it's a rapid fire question.
Okay.
All right. So I'm hitting you the questions.
All right.
And then you have to answer very quickly.
Okay.
You got no time to think.
Okay.
As quickly as possible.
All right.
You ready?
I'm ready. I think I'm ready. What are you doing? Okay.
Romance or historical fiction?
Historical fiction. Okay. I thought the historical fiction.
You're not supposed to
Okay,
pick.
historical fiction.
Buche Metata or Flora Mopa?
Buche Meta.
Chuna Chebe or...
Chinua Achebe. Do we need an or?
Netflix or cinema?
Netflix. Actually, cinema.
What did you say?
You told me not to think. Cinema. Sorry, I was like, okay, I'm lazy, Netflix. No, cinema for sure.
Cinema.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Cinema.
If you were to be a superhero, what would you pick? Flying or invisible?
Oh,
You're thinking.
I'm thinking flying.
Flying.
Yeah.
Why would you fly?
I'd love to fly.
I know.
I'd love to be invisible too, but I'd love to fly. I feel like you can be invisible. That's a choice.
Yeah.
You can,
Yeah.
there are ways of doing that, but flying, yeah.
Right. Is there an alternative ending to this book?
There are a plethora of endings to this book.
Give us one. Give us one.
Well, the ending to this book could be the ending that you probably want. Very easily. Very, very easily. The ending to this book could equally be, Samson having a happy ending as opposed to Prince. There are many endings.
I know. All right. Well, I'm gonna have to let you go. Chioma, this has been fun. Thank you so much for coming and doing this with us. We appreciate you. And the book. Where can we get the book for those who are?
So I think it comes out in August in Nigeria with Mesobe Books. It's out in the UK from April the 11th, so it's available on Amazon, it's available on Audible, it's out there.
It's out there, so make sure to go to your bookstore, anywhere you get your books, make sure to go grab it. Chioma, congratulations again and well done. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much again for coming on. And that's Chioma Okereke. She's our guest for today. We've been discussing her book, Water Baby. It's out everywhere in Nigeria. It's going to be out in August and everywhere else that you do get your book. So Amazon, Audible, and if you're in London, it's going to be out in April of 2024. My name is Judith Atibi. This has been Literati right here on News Central TV. Make sure to catch you. I will catch you another time. Until then, bye for now.